Okay, so I couldn't find a cloak, but I did find a light. So that's like the same thing, right? Hello and welcome to another episode of R Rated, where today we are looking at Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange, Metroid, Other M. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It literally took me until this morning to realize the acronym of MOM for the subtitle of this movie, and it's extremely fitting in literally the exact same way that it is for Metroid, Other M. So there we go. I'm going to do as non-spoilery of a review as I can for this, and then I will jump into spoilers, and I will warn you when that happens. We're not going to do spoilers just yet. We're going to stick with the surface level stuff to begin with, and then we'll get into the more spoilery stuff as we go. So welcome, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. One of the big criticisms that this movie got in the lead up to the actual release was that it was less of a Doctor Strange movie and more of just a movie that happened to feature Doctor Strange. I think that's half true. This movie does a really good job of making Doctor Strange easily one of the more capable characters of the MCU. I wouldn't necessarily say strongest, but certainly most capable. It puts him on his back foot in a really serious way, and he actually makes a really solid, main protagonist, sort of not even like an audience avatar or anything, or an audience surrogate, but just essentially the world that he's operating in for the course of this movie is so ridiculous and large and powerful that it puts him at a pretty good position in terms of like, okay, we believe that there are stakes. We believe that he's not just going to automatically win just by virtue of being here. So there's a lot that can be done here that'll be pretty cool to work with. Benedict Cumberbatch still is an excellent Doctor Strange. He's obviously having a real good time with this. He said recently that he would happily play the character for another 10 years. I don't have any problem with that, nor do I think he's exaggerating. He visibly is enjoying the hell out of it, and I think the nature of Doctor Strange as a character has been really great for him, where he gets to play version after version after version of himself. I think between this and What If, he actively plays a total of 7 versions of Doctor Strange. There's a lot of him. And there's subtle differences between them that are really fun to kind of explore. But also, this is a rare way to make him be entirely out of his depth for the duration of this. Like, if he was going through the same ordeals as who else? I'm trying to think of like other recent movies. If No Way Home obviously doesn't really count because he is in the movie and he gets, sidelined for a while there. But if, for example, he was fighting the Red Room in the Black Widow movie, he would have had absolutely no trouble making that happen at all. He probably would actually be able to do pretty well against Wen-Wu in Shang-Chi. But this is a case where the stakes are just right, I think, for Doctor Strange. And he's pitted against enemies that get increasingly terrifying. This movie was directed by Sam Raimi, who comic book fans are going to know as the director of the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, which famously featured a brief mention of Doctor Strange in Spider-Man 2, when J. Jonah Jameson and his assistant are trying to come up with, or one of his writers or editors or whatever, are trying to come up with a name to brand Otto Octavius, and they come up with Doctor Strange before Dr. Octopus. But horror fans will probably recognize him as the original director of the Evil Dead series, which is an interesting series all unto itself. I forget the name of the short film that it originally was, because Evil Dead was not his first attempt at that. Evil Dead was a more fleshed out version of it, and then we had Evil Dead 2, which was less straight horror. Evil Dead 1 is very much a horror movie. Evil Dead 2 adds a little bit. Evil Dead 2 is probably the best example in my mind of what Sam Raimi's like preferred style tends to be. Scary, creepy, but with some interesting, unsettling, almost cartoonish sort of silliness going on at the same time. The composer for the score this time around, I believe, was Danny Elfman, who was actually a really good fit here. And I think does a good job of taking the serious and the silly and blending those together in a way that really works. Evil Dead, oh my God, Army of Darkness is the third Evil Dead movie, and that one goes almost entirely into Silly Town. I don't like it as much as Evil Dead 2. It's a fun movie, but it's not as good of a movie, in my opinion, as Evil Dead 2. But the range of those three movies gives you a good idea of what Sam Raimi likes to do when he's got complete control. And I have to say that Multiverse of Madness clearly is a Sam Raimi movie. Like, it's got his fingerprints all over it. In a similar way, so one of the criticisms the MCU tends to get is that directors rarely get to put their personal, stamp onto these movies. Like they all kind of blend together. They usually don't have that personal directorial feel to them. And while I can see the argument for that, they're certainly not wrong for the most part with that. I would say that there are exceptions to the rule. Two very big exceptions, in my opinion. I think the first Thor is a pretty plainly Kenneth Branagh film. It's not as highbrow as his actual Shakespeare, movies and things, but I think that it's still pretty far up there in terms of like what he's trying to do with that character. Maybe the biggest example of a director having like a personal impact on the feel of the movie would be Iron Man 3, which equally has Shane Black written all over it. It's such a Shane Black movie. You get those shades of Lethal Weapon. You get those shades of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And similarly here, you get elements of more Evil Dead than anything, though there's little bits and pieces of Spider-Man-iness going on there too. I would also say to a certain extent that Joss Whedon has a decent impact on the first two Avengers movies in terms of their tone as well. Less so, I'd say, than Branagh and Black, and also Raimi as well now too. But I would, so Sam Raimi, this movie is very much a Sam Raimi movie, both in the serious segments and the less serious segments. I think one of the cooler things that they do with this movie is you go back and you watch the Evil Dead movies and everybody's wearing like rubber and latex and some physical special effects makeup being done to kind of give cool effects on people's faces and things. And, I think this movie did a really good job of taking that and elevating it with a little bit of CGI. It's the whole point of CGI is to augment existing effects to sell them better. Sometimes people go way overboard with it. CGI blood spatters are always like really embarrassing. Characters that are just rendered in full CGI for no reason are really embarrassing. But here we get some stuff, some pretty decently gory looking effects that are really well sold between a combination of makeup and well applied CGI. I think they did a really good job with that. As for, I've said gory a couple times now. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. This isn't like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or a My Bloody Valentine or any of those like classic horror kind of like slasher movies. It's not like that. It is decidedly darker than almost all of the MCU movies and shows to date. It is hilarious to me that Moon Knight got the reputation of being the darkest, most brutal Marvel property so far, which I guess like within the MCU, I could see an argument for it, I suppose. But this one kind of blew Moon Knight out of the water in that regard, in my opinion. There are scenes, there are moments that occur that were downright shocking. Stuff that I would never have anticipated an MCU movie ever doing. And they just went for it. I imagine that there must have been some real fights, both between Sam and you know, I would imagine that Kevin Feige is really going to bat for the directors pretty hard. I would have to imagine there was a push that there was going to be a fight between Marvel and Disney over the stuff that they'd be allowed to include. And also, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a fight between Marvel and the MPAA over what they were going to be allowed to show and still get a PG-13 rating. They were getting kind of close in a couple aspects. They could have certainly gone further if they wanted to go like hard horror. There's a little part of me that almost wishes that there was an R-rated cut that was also made for like later distribution, because I think that'd be really interesting to see what would happen if they went just balls to the wall with it. But I would say that that this one was pushing some envelopes in terms of keeping that PG-13 rating. There were definitely times where I was just like, man, we are doing some, like, I was kind of like squirming in my seat a couple times, especially near the end. The last hour is kind of a nonstop holy shit kind of sequence there. The stakes are set relatively early in the movie, and they really don't take their foot off the gas once things get moving. They briefly do. Maybe 45 minutes in, they take their foot off the gas for like about 15 minutes or so. But then from that, once you hit like the 1 hour mark and change, they're really pushing hard through the rest of the movie. You get to see a lot of face-offs that people have probably been wondering about for a while. How would so-and-so do against so-and-so, which is pretty cool. I think the characters that got used got a lot of good focus. Some more than others. I would love to see more Wong. Wong is featured relatively well in this movie. He doesn't get like a ton of screen time, but he is in there a good amount. Oh no, I looked up how to pronounce her name, and then I forgot it. Xochitl, Xochitl, and I do not know how to pronounce that properly, but I'm gonna go with. I think I saw a video of her pronouncing it as Sochi. And maybe there's kind of a little soft in there at the end, but like Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez, she was fun. There are people who were really annoyed with her and kind of called her a MacGuffin, which, yeah, but also that's not the first time that that's been a thing in these Marvel movies or in comic book movies in general. A great example in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be Jane Foster in Thor: The Dark World. Now, to be fair, not the kindest comparison to make, considering that is, in my opinion, the worst movie that they have done altogether. Outside of, I can't say, I don't think that Eternals is worse than Thor: The Dark World, looking at it today, right now. But there were complaints that like, she was just kind of a MacGuffin, and she's just convenient little. It's like, sometimes that's how this stuff works. Especially this movie is the most basic way that I can describe this movie is that it's a horror chase movie. It's almost a monster movie in some ways. It does a lot with these characters that I would have loved to see happen in stuff like The Incredible Hulk back in 2008. Being able to lean into the scarier, darker elements is a lot of fun. There are some really great visuals that they go with. And also, I didn't even mention, Sam Raimi, I don't remember the DP's name for this movie, but you definitely get classic Sam Raimi cinematography and editing going on too. There's a lot of fisheye. There's a lot of handheld cameras really getting, like, doing rotating and weird things around people's faces. There's points where characters are, the camera goes so close that the character's literally grabbing the camera to shake it. Some really, like, it's cheesy, but it's a good cheese, in my opinion. It's that great, like, 80s style horror cheese that it's kind of comfy in its discomfort, if that makes any sense. You get some of those like quiet editing moments where, like, you know, you just kind of like have that, oh, what's going on? And like someone's trying to pay attention for a thing. And the complaint a lot of people have about bad horror movies that they rely on jump scares. This movie does not do that. Not zero. It does have jump scares. I think they're well done for the most part. Two of them come to mind. One of them, I'd say the editing goes on a little long prior to the jump scare. But I think the idea of like you're just building that tension, like it's doing that once is not a problem. I think doing it more than once would have been an issue. They used their one. They got their one. They used it. But they had a couple jump scare kind of moments, and I think that they were done fine to solid effect. And instead, they relied on really kind of horrifying visuals. There were a lot of really fucked up things going on. Somebody watched The Ring right before they worked on some of the effects for this movie. Like, there's some really interesting shit going on. I did see the movie in 3D. Which isn't always easy with these. It wasn't too obstructive. I was able to get the 3D effect just fine. I was a little off to the left, so it probably wasn't as strong as it would have been. I don't know if this movie needs 3D. Not needs 3D. None of them need 3D. I don't know if this one benefits from 3D in the same way that the first one would have. There were definitely some shots that were like leaning into the 3D a little bit, which I was like, all right. But the 3D was fine. It wasn't like mind-blowing in any meaningful way. It was pretty cool though. For those asking, here's our brief intermission. There was in fact the Avatar: The Way of Water trailer that was shown before. All the trailers leading up to that for stuff like Don't Worry Darling. It's literally the only one that I can even remember that was in there. Oh, Jurassic World Dominion, Thor Love and Thunder. There were a handful that were there. Then it was like, time to put on your 3D glasses. And then the Avatar one was in 3D for the 3D showing. It looks pretty. There was virtually no dialogue in the trailer. It was mostly set over music. There's already a leak that's made it across Twitter that is the trailer that I saw. I'm not a big fan of Avatar. I don't hate it. I just don't really, I'm not into it. It looks very pretty. The first one looked very pretty also, but there was not a lot of story to chew into, so I was kind of like, eh. Now, ironically, here we are with Doctor Strange, which also doesn't have a ton of story going on. For a horror movie, you don't always want too much story because it does bog it down, or you start getting, if you get too much lore in a horror movie, in my opinion, you start to get a little bit bogged down and like, sounds kind of weird. I don't know. That's kind of odd. The story here is relatively basic, all things considered. If for those who are curious, because Disney had said like, oh, here's the movies and things you need to see before you watch this, and their list was Doctor Strange, WandaVision, Loki, and What If. I would argue Doctor Strange, I mean, it's helpful to see. It's obviously a sequel and follow-up to the character. WandaVision is required viewing for this, in my opinion. The movie does try to explain stuff in a way where you wouldn't necessarily have to see WandaVision, but you should watch WandaVision before. It's a great show, in my opinion. I think it's still the best show they've done so far, and it does inform stuff in a way where you'll be comfortable immediately going into this. Loki is not required viewing. What If is not required viewing, but you get a little bit of a bonus for it. You'll get some stuff that you're like, oh, okay. It's not required. You're not going to be missing out by not having seen What If. No Way Home is also the I'm worried that people are going to get the wrong idea about this movie because of the advertising. The trailers try and make it seem like, hey, Doctor Strange, you really fucked up the multiverse when you did that thing with Spider-Man. Now it's time for you to pay for those mistakes. Has nothing to do with this movie. Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. There's an extremely passing reference to No Way Home, and even then, it's not... So for those who aren't aware, Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness were supposed to be released in the opposite order that they were. My understanding is that America Chavez was going to essentially be in Doctor Strange's place in No Way Home, and I don't know how much this movie would have been different. I'm a little unclear on that. Like, they haven't been super public on the script changes that they had to make. Allegedly on this movie, there were changes that were being made literally like minutes before shooting. which I could kind of understand given the nature of how things were going, and also kind of the fast pace of this movie. It does move pretty quickly for most of it. But yeah, there was a reason I went down that track. But yeah, required viewing for this: Doctor Strange, WandaVision. That's kind of it. It helps to have seen Infinity War and Endgame and No Way Home, since those are also ones that feature Doctor Strange, and those events do kind of get referenced lightly, but you're not going to be missing out by not having seen those. I think that is about all that I'm going to be able to say about the movie without getting into spoilers. The acting was really solid across the board, I think. Really good use of classic horror movie, especially 80s horror movie tropes, to great success, in my opinion. I think Sam Raimi was right at home doing this stuff again. I would give this movie... I really boxed myself into a corner by not being able to give half scores. I think I'm going to round up and call this one a 9 out of 10. I know this movie's pretty divisive. I know that it's getting a lot of like strong positive, strong negative. Maybe not strong negative, but kind of like what the fuck on social media and things. I get that. I really enjoyed myself. This is probably the first MCU movie that you definitely should not bring young children to. I think it goes a little far in that regard, where young kids are going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But otherwise, I had a really good time with it. And at this point, I'm going to hop into spoilers. I think that's all that I'm going to have. I was going to originally be like, oh, I'll give you guys a heads up when it's time for spoilers, so that you can come back at the end for my wrap up. But I think that about sums it up there. So for those of you who will be leaving us, thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe and comment down below what you are hoping for the movie in the future. For those of you who are sticking around, it is time to get into spoilers. This is your last warning. If you're trying to avoid spoilers, get out of here now. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So obviously, the biggest thing, there's so many, it's all wrapped around one core nugget in this movie, but the most spoilable element of this movie is essentially the Illuminati. And now I know that in the movie, in the trailers, they do kind of lean more and more into... So like the official trailer for the movie teased Professor X, and then the final teaser released this week, like Tuesday, I think straight up showed Captain Carter. Like, what are you doing? There are some like big cameos that they're throwing in there, and they're just like, put them in the trailer. We got to get people in these fucking seats. Like, what are you doing? But the Illuminati. So the Illuminati has 6 members. Maybe 6 members. I'm a little unclear as to whether or not Baron Mordo is part of the Illuminati, but we have our members. We have Captain Carter, not the same Captain Carter from What If, but another Captain Carter from What If, so that's kind of a fun thing there. We have Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel this time around, as opposed to Carol Danvers. Otherwise, her powers seem to be exactly the same. We have... Black Bolt, Blackagar Boltigan, or whatever his fucking full name is. Black Bolt is here. And also, not the same Black Bolt from the Inhumans TV show, as far as I'm aware, but Black Bolt, whose ability, he's got a little fucking tuning fork on his mask, but his ability is that any sound that he makes from his mouth gets magnified infinitely, essentially, or to an extreme degree. They did a really good job with Black Bolt of showing just how devastating his ability is, in a way that and blended in with a really sad kind of moment, and also helping prove just how powerful Wanda is when he gets fucking decked. So I got Domino's is bothering me on my phone. I didn't order Domino's. They're just like, hey, you wanna later? You wanna stuff your stupid face with pizza? But yeah, so Black Bolt, he essentially, so Holy cow, there's so many things. So a good chunk of the movie is spent in the dimension, I guess, is maybe the easiest way, because it's sort of a universe, sort of a timeline. Dimension kind of wraps them together. Dimension 838, where the sacred timeline is. It may not be the sacred timeline any longer. I think the concept of the sacred timeline is kind of lost. But the main canon timeline of the MCU is Dimension 616, which is the same designation given to the main universe in Marvel Comics, whereas I want to say the cinematic universe is Dimension like 199999 or something silly. I'm glad that they're just sticking with 616. People are like, oh, but that's the one from the comics. And it's like, yeah, maybe they haven't discovered the comic universe yet. They do discover an animated universe very briefly in this movie, but it's still like it's such a pointless thing. And it's like, all right, so we've got the people who are in charge here in Dimension 838 kind of coming up with their own numbering, and they didn't even name themselves number one. So give them a break. Maybe they're going off of like the atomic weight of cesium in their universe or something, and that's how they're designating these. I don't know. But we have essentially the Doctor Strange from that universe during the Infinity War, when all of the Illuminati, who it seems the Illuminati have essentially replaced the Avengers in terms of who the like superhero super team is in this universe. So the Illuminati tries to fight Thanos on Titan. And meanwhile, Doctor Strange from this universe goes and finds the Darkhold and uses it to discover the Book of Vishanti, which is essentially a super magic book that will give you whatever you need. It'll give a sorcerer whatever they need in order to win. And they do that, and they win. They beat Thanos. The snap never happened in this universe. And the problem is when you use the Darkhold, it corrupts you. And so the Illuminati decided together, I think with Stephen's acceptance, that they needed to kill him in order to prevent the effect of the Darkhold from corrupting him and causing him to run amok, essentially. And so Black Bolt just whispers, "I'm sorry." And that's enough to just atomize him there on Titan. So we got them. I believe Baron Mordo as the Sorcerer Supreme now that Doctor Strange is gone, is also part of the Illuminati. And then, so we're like, okay, so here's our four that are there. It's like, oh, and the smartest man alive, Reed Richards. I'm like, whoa, and holy shit, it's fucking John Krasinski. They actually fucking did it. The Mad Lads actually fucking did it. That is such a cool. I don't remember the last time a fan casting has ever been canonized that hard before. That was fucking incredible. And I was just kind of like in my seat. I was like, whoa. What the fuck? Like, so prior to this, we see this universe's version of Christine Palmer, who is working in essentially the labs that have Doctor Strange and America Chavez kind of imprisoned while they're figuring out what's going on. And he's like, so where are we? Who are you working for? And she's like, well, you're here in the labs of the Baxter Foundation. I'm like, oh no. Oh God, are we actually, it's beginning. We're starting the Fantastic Four thing. And nope, in this universe, we've got our Reed Richards, played by John Krasinski. He's part of the Fantastic Four. And I think that they misjudged what was going to be the bigger surprise there, because then they wheel out Sir Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier in the big yellow wheelchair from the old cartoon show. And it was really awesome. Don't get me wrong. You have a little French horn in the back doing the... It's like, oh, nice. Nostalgia right in the chest parts. But the trailer's super spoiled that he was going to be in the movie. So I think that Reed Richards showing up last minute, like, sorry, I'm late, guys, would have been like the bigger, whoa, holy shit. But yeah, it's a literal who's who of alternate universe heroes. And they're like, yeah, our Doctor Strange started to lose it, so we had to murder him. Also, we were unsure if allowing him to live was going to cause an incursion, and just the word incursion just had me like, oh Jesus. So this is where they're going with their multiverse shit. Okay. I think that the incursions, similar to how they wound up working in the comics, are going to be the end game, haha, of this multiverse saga that they're in the middle of. I think the multiversal saga is going to be their second major saga. We're going to have Kang. We're going to have, all these things. The stuff with the Watcher and What If are all going on. I think that it's going to ultimately end with, people have been talking about Secret Wars, right? So Secret Wars and an incursion level threat are bound to be the end game of all of this. And so that was kind of a scary thing there. It's like, oh, this is where we're going. That's going to get messed up, and we're going to be seeing a lot more variants in a hurry when that starts really revving up. So they they decide like, we're going to have to decide what to do with you. We're under attack because Wanda found them. And the four of them, minus Mordo and minus Xavier, because he's coming up behind. They show up in front of Wanda, who at this point has already eviscerated the sorcerers of Kamar-Taj, the masters of the mystic arts. They've been just destroyed. And Mr. Fantastic comes out and is like, Wanda, I understand you're hurting. People are like, oh, smartest man in the world, dumbest move ever. And it's like, one of Reed Richards' comparative things between him and like Tony Stark and Hank Pym, maybe not Hank McCoy, but like the difference between Reed Richards and the rest of the ultra geniuses of Marvel Comics tends to be that usually Reed tries to appeal to emotion a little bit more, and he's a little bit more of a thoughtful kind of person when it comes to other people's feelings. Sometimes he doesn't. He does get wrapped up into his own ego and the idea that science is the ultimate, and that's been his downfall before. But here he's trying to be reasonable. He's trying to be rational. He's trying to appeal to her, to her emotion as a parent. 'Cause he's like, I got kids of my own. I know what you're going through. And she's like, do the children have a mother? And he's like, yes. And he's like, good. They'll have someone to take care of them. And then like, whoa, like that's a pretty direct threat. And he's like, if you do one more move, Black Bolt here can destroy you with a single word from his mouth. And she's like, what mouth? And his mouth is gone. And I was like, oh, that's going to get weird. And then like in ultra bullet time slow motion, a thought crosses my brain where I'm like, he just inhaled a second ago. Oh no. And he panics and lets out a little, and just implodes his skull with it. Liquefies his brain. And that was such a legitimately shocking moment, even in this movie, let alone for a Marvel movie. That was like so much more brutal. Like, how many deaths have we actually seen in this series, like up close? This is probably I would say this is that was the darkest and most brutal death we'd seen since Loki got choked out and had his neck snapped by Thanos. That was a pretty rough one too. So there's that. And then this is followed up immediately by Mr. Fantastic trying to like bind her using his stretchy elastic abilities. And she turns him to string cheese. Literally his limbs one by one start shredding into string cheese. It's obviously extremely painful for him. And he yells out in pain for a second before his head explodes like a water balloon. You're like, oh my fucking God. Oh no. And like all of a sudden, at this point, I'm now like, oh no, now this is The Boys. Now this is Invincible. This shit's getting very fucky very fast. Captain Carter gets bisected by her own shield, which is less cool and intense than the others, though for Cap, who's always been able to catch their shields, it's kind of a like, ooh, shit. And then for Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel, she almost is able to, I like the way they keep escalating with these characters too, because it's like Black Bolt's their secret weapon. He's knocked out. Reed jumps out front. He can do stretchy stuff. Okay, he dies. Okay, Captain Carter, she's a superhuman. She's got super physicality. She can actually maybe stand toe-to-toe for a bit, and she does, but then she gets literally cut in half and dies. Okay, shit. All right, Captain Marvel, she is one of the strongest beings in the universe, and she almost manages it, but then Wanda's able to just kind of crack away her armor and throw her into a statue, and then pulls the statue on her, and that kills her, which feels a little bit cheap. And then Professor X shows up, and they have a little mind thing that they do. And that was a really cool thing because we haven't seen a whole lot of Professor X do this in any of the X-Men movies. I want to say X-Men Apocalypse is like the only time they've actually done this, which yikes. But he goes in, he finds Wanda under a bunch of rubble that is evocative of the rubble in her home as a child. I forget, was there a door also? It reminded me a little bit, for obvious reasons, it reminded me a little bit of him entering Jean Grey's home in X-Men United, X-Men the Last Stand, which is fitting. Oh, there's also a TV that's playing WandaVision on it, which is kind of interesting. So Wanda from this universe is trapped under the rubble in this mind, and then this red cloud just starts showing up. It's really crisp, bright, vibrant colors there. And Wanda from the MCU just kind of lurches out and just snaps his neck, and down goes Professor X. It's like, oh, shit. Okay, she just ripped through all of them like they were nothing. So that was kind of horrifying. They leave. Christine comes with them at this point and jumps to another universe. So now we've got America Chavez from some unknown dimension. We've got Doctor Strange from 616. We've got Christine Palmer from 838. And they've landed in a universe that's falling apart. And it looks like, what was it, Strange Supreme or whatever, his universe from the What If episode. It's meant to look like that, but it's not. It's just another universe that's falling apart. And I guess in the MCU, universes falling apart do so with ink blots, which is fitting. It's a nice little send up to other universe ending things in the comics, and also just its history as a comic. The Strange versus Strange fight was interesting. Toccata and Fugue in D minor was just such a bizarre. They literally fight with music. That little da-da-da, and it was just like, oh, that's cute. And they're fighting with more and more complex music. And he fights with the note of a harp at one point to blow up this swirling thing. It's such a creative and weird. It's so corny and strange that it works for me. Doctor Strange dreamwalks into his dead body from a different universe that's currently in 616. And then a bunch of demons that look straight out of Army of Darkness show up and try to drag him to hell. And they fight him off, and he uses them as a cape. And he's got this really great zombified makeup augmented with CGI, like I was saying before. It looks so slick. A lot of like really hard Dutch angles for stuff that was like it. So much good shit. Wanda chasing after them with what looked like a broken leg. Through the sewers was a really legitimately creepy kind of moment. And also someone mentioned, I saw online, it's very evocative of the first Ultron that showed up, who was all broken and had like a fucked up leg. Also Ultron sentries are just a thing at the Illuminati's, headquarters. It's unclear whether these were constructed by Tony. It's unclear if they might've been constructed by Reed or by Hank or by some other person. But it's just kind of neat that at one point she grabs one of them and goes in a very similar way to how she does to Ultron's heart in Age of Ultron. The whole movie is just decked out with all these. I've barely even talked about America Chavez's star punching ability. She can essentially her ability is that she can punch a star into anything, including the universe, which is how the multiversal travel happens. And it's a very cool visual. There's so much. I feel like I'm just like recapping the movie at this point, but I didn't want to spoil some of those reveals. I didn't want to spoil some of those things there. Wanda is truly horrifying. And this felt in some ways like the only way to deal with the fact that she was already the strongest and was only getting stronger in the MCU and was becoming a legitimate threat. I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I'm going to go back and see it again. Sarah wasn't able to join me when I went to go see it the other night, so we're going to go for a trip together. I may even go see it a third time, depending on how much I like the second. Who knows? I'm probably not going to see it in 3D the second time because I do want to not have to worry about that so much. I don't know. Hopefully I'll get better seats too. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this. I've been rambling. I've been just kind of recapping the movie, but I thought it was so cool. Not a perfect movie for sure. The third eye looked terrible every time it came up. I guess Charlize Theron is playing Clea in a stinger at the end. She literally just cuts a hole in the fabric of the universe into the dark dimension, and they dive in. Bruce Campbell was funny as Pizza Papa, though I honestly would have loved if he was either I like a very Spider-Man style cameo for him. I was low-key hoping he might have a loose cameo as Ash Campbell, or I would have loved even more if he was Mysterio. I would have loved also if he was somehow just another Spider-Man or some shit. I don't know. But that was a fun one. Pizza Papa was fun, and he had a great little stinger at the end where the curse of him punching himself, he fought his own hand again. Haven't done that since Evil Dead 2. The curse ends, and he's like, oh, it's over.